Hey guys, it's Dan, and welcome back to Unified Gaming. Now in this one, we're going to look at update 6.3.0, otherwise known as Flames of Ambition. And oh my goodness, does this look promising. You know, 2020 was a bit questionable, but this patch alone and what they've got planned really gives me hope for the future, especially seeing the kind of Twitch stream from the other day, so I would recommend seeing that if you haven't. I will touch upon that throughout this video. As with this one, I'm just going to go through and give you my take on what is really important from a PvP standpoint, particularly, mainly BGs, that's what I do a lot of PvP in, and also Cyrodiil now and again. And I'll also touch upon PvE stuff because I do trials and dungeons, so anything that's relevant I'll touch upon. As with this stuff, there's loads of changes and it's really hard to cover in one video, so I'm going to put up following videos going through their brand new CP system, like it's brand new and it looks amazing, and really break down how does it work, what do you need to know so you're ready for day one. So make sure that you are subscribed so you don't miss that. But with introductions out of the way, let's just get into it. So as you can see, this is 6.3.0. There's a link in the description if you want to read it yourself, but you can just put this on in the background and listen along, okay? It brings 2 new dungeons like normal, so they're 2 4-player dungeons, and they actually look quite cool. One of them is really cool. It's set in the Hughes Bane, so Gold Coast, and where you get to actually go and sort of explore some of the sort of imperial styles. So you get an imperial ruin that you get to explore. So obviously a castle type building, which is really nice. Then have this cauldron, which again, it's a really cool building. It's kind of very Daedra sort of esque. So it really kind of sets the precedent for this year-long story, which, as you can probably tell, is all featuring Mehrunes Dagon, which is phenomenal. Like, as a avid Elder Scrolls fan, played obviously Morrowind, played Oblivion, played Skyrim, now ESO, seeing some of the Oblivion stuff, just nostalgia just like right through the roof. So yeah, let's not let that sway our judgments too much though in this one. What I'm really interested though is not just the dungeons, but it's actually the update, the base stuff. So it brings loads and loads of changes, new features. They've updated the champion point system. They've completely reworked it, changed the UI. So it's now in a point where it goes horizontal rather than vertical as heavily. So it means you spread broadly. So your power's kind of broad, and then you can specialize into specific things rather than being good at lots of things. A bit like skill trees, we'll touch upon more of that, and there will be a following video because it's really complicated at first, but it's not that bad once you've played with it. There's also a new UI system for it, and they've also changed the armour bonuses. So armours now give you positives and negatives. So if you're in light armour, you do more magic damage to heavy armour people, for example. You move quicker, it's easier to just navigate the battlefield. Whereas in heavy, it's harder to navigate because your armour's weighing you down, so it's what you would expect. But you have more resistance, you take less damage from physical attacks. So it kind of goes hand in hand. If you also like doing sort of min-maxing and that kind of stuff, finally they've actually added advanced stats UI. So this just gives you what does your stat page really look like. So the penetration, the frost damage, the fire damage, you name it, like you know exactly what this character is good or bad at. So it's going to make doing build videos much more interesting for the CP change and this. And if you're a high-end enthusiast, there's some stuff there for you. So all in all, there's stuff for everyone, but we're going to focus on just gameplay sort of stuff and not so much the dungeons themselves. So you go back and read it yourself, or check out someone like Lyko or Skinny Cheeks or Nefas ESO. They cover PvE stuff a lot heavier. But what does this kind of bring? Well, the dungeons are up here, as we've said. As with the sets, you got Choose Swarm Fury. This is a light armor set, and it's kind of like Titanborn, but rather than it giving you increased weapon damage, it gives you increased critical damage and critical strike chance. So the idea is that as you get lower health, you get more crit chance and you get more crit damage. So this could be good, particularly in PvE actually, because it has been quite strong in PvE because they did nerf some of the stuff. And it might be good on gank builds, but if they give it the same Titanborn treatment, where you have to be in combat to get this bonus, it's going to be so-so. The medium armor set, Kinath's Wrath, I think I pronounced it really, really badly. This is a medium armor set. When you deal damage with a light or heavy attack, you gain a stack of burn and heat for 5 seconds, up to 5 stacks. When you get a 5, you get a Major Berserk, so 10% damage. Anybody nearby who's on your team, they will get minor Berserk, increasing the damage for 5%. So it's not a great set in all honesty. You get minor berserk quite easily, and 10% boost isn't worth it. So I don't see this being too great. This, however, could be good in PvP for a healer or support build like a tank. If you use weapon and jewelry, for example, you then get access to a nice damage boost for your whole team. The heavy armor set, Drake's Rush, it's health, stamina. When you bash an enemy, you and up to 11 group members gain major heroism nearby. That is phenomenal. Like in PvE, that's going to be a really, really strong set for a tank in trials. So giving everybody major heroism, which is more ultimates, which is more damage. If you have Master Architect, that's more uptime on Major Slayer. So you can see there's great synergy in PvE. As with PvP, being able to give people major heroism is a really, really useful buff to get. And the cooldown isn't that bad. Like you get it for 12 seconds, and there's 18 seconds cooldown, so it's only about 6 seconds downtime. So this is really good. The monster sets, both of them were quite disappointing actually. This is Encrates Behemoth. I really mispronounced that first one. Being dyslexic, apologies. But it's Magicka, dealing fire damage against you, the aura around you for 12 seconds, and it's up for 12 meters. Anybody nearby in the aura has reduced flame damage if they're on your team. Anybody on the other team though, they take 5% more flame damage. This can occur every 15 seconds. This seems very PvE, in all honesty. If you can make the boss take 5% fire damage for Magicka DPS, that's a big damage boost, and it's got quite a high uptime. So I can see this being quite good on tanks in PvE. Use this one with the new heavy armor set, and you've got quite a solid tank already for just bonus damage. As with the Cauldron sets, you've got Unleashed Ritualist, which is quite cool. It's Magicka. When you deal damage, you mark them. Enemies you mark take an additional 16% from pets. Now, the pets include things that are like permanent pets, or pets that are temporary, but they kind of like, you can target them. So Mad Tinkerer, for example, you can kind of dodge it and stuff. But things like Cliff Racer, you kind of summon it and it's not so much of a pet. So it's a bit confusing. But we will touch upon this set and test it in PTS, so make sure you are subscribed to see what this actually does. But this could be good on pet sorcerers especially. 16% damage boost on pets. And then you've got Dagon's Dominion. So this is a medium armor set. It's weapon damage, stamina, weapon damage, and it adds almost 500 weapon damage to your area of effect abilities. This is really, really interesting from a PvP standpoint. PvP, single target really sucks in Cyrodiil. Like, it's really, really terrible. If you're in group play, AoE is king. That's what the whole AoE testing was all about. Having a set that buffs all of the AoE damage for a stamina build, you've got both AoE skills, you've got Steel Tornado type things, your Dawnbreakers. That's a lot of damage. And then that's more damage and more damage. So this is a very strong set for PvP in my eyes, especially for group play. You then have Full Killer's Ward. This is a heavy armor set. It's armor, health. This is interesting as well, but I don't see it being used too much in PvP. When you block, you put a shield on people nearby. It absorbs 4,000 damage. If it breaks, they gain 5,680 magicka and stamina, that's a phenomenal amount of sustain. The issue is it's got a 30-second cooldown. So although the shield can be put on them every 10 seconds, which is great, if the shield breaks, they can't get the resources back for 30 seconds. So it's kind of like having a potion automatic. So I can see it being good for tanks in dungeons. Maybe trials, but I can't see it being used trials massively. It's more tanks in dungeons, to be honest. You might use it in some BGs, but that's about it. And then the monster set is really disappointing, to be honest. It's Baron Saunders. So Dras, I think it's pronounced. It's stamina, health, magicka. It's a great one piece like Doma House, which is a really good set, or Swarm Mother. Applying a status effect to an enemy grants you a stack of ftudor's Ambition for 10 seconds, up to 3 stacks. When you get 3 stacks, they're removed and you gain 3 ultimate. Yeah. And there's a 2-second cooldown. Yeah. It's not a great set. I haven't read through all of this, so I don't know what Bloodspawn's like, but my initial thoughts was, this is a poor man's Bloodspawn. I could be wrong, so they might have changed that, but we'll find out in a little bit. New titles and stuff, new sort of motifs. This is the big one. The champion point rework is huge. I'm not going to read all of it. I'm not going to bore you, but I will just stress heavily, please check that you're subscribed, because I'm going to do a video going through this in great detail. What does it do? How do you min-max it? And how does it actually work? Because it's changed drastically. But what's the key things to take away from this? Well, the big one is they've changed the goals. The CP now will focus on horizontal progression over vertical. So what that means is that rather than your power getting stronger and stronger and stronger, but the player gets stronger with more and more CP, which happened previously. As you get your CP, you just get kind of a blanket of like bonuses. And in order to prevent the person from getting too OP and have that power creep, which is a real issue in PvE, they've basically added like a slot bar. It's kind of like a skill bar. And you can slot certain constellations in order to get certain bonuses. So you've got some stars that give you a very flat stat, which is when you put in 10 points here, you gain 500 stamina. Great. You put 20 points here, you gain 1,000 stamina. You get the idea. That's like a passive one, that's horizontal. You can have that all the time. But there's some that are like active, a bit like skills, where if you slot them, you then gain an active bonus. And these could be things that could be like a percentage increase. Increase your damage done with damage over time abilities by 2%, 4%, 6%, 8%. You get the idea. So you have kind of a blanket of stats and just base things you can always have on at all times, but then you have to pick what is right for you. Will you specialize in dot damage, single target damage, AoE? Will you specialize in penetration, or would you specialize in armor and survival and crit resistance? So there's a lot of flexibility with it. And they've also added things to work in a way that you can also support crafting and those kind of playstyles. So there's a lot of kind of utility stuff that you can have, like movement-based things, resurrecting people for free or a lot cheaper, repairing stuff. You get the idea. And there's also the fitness side, which is about your being fit and healthy, so strong, staying alive, that kind of idea. I'm going to go through in much more details, but just note that it's changed and it's kind of like a skill system where you have skills you can slot, your active, slottable things, and you have non-ones that are always on, like passives. The one thing to note is that you can respec your champion points if you make a mistake. That's 3,000. And the little ones you put in the top, the slottable ones, they can be put up and down at all times. So you can go, I'm on this boss, and this boss doesn't need single target, it needs AoE because there's loads of ads. I can just switch to one of the things out, bish bash bosh, you're good to go. So it does give you that flexibility too. And then the big thing with the CP thing is they've increased the cap to a whopping 3,600. That is huge. You do still get CP when you get over 50, and they have adjusted it so you kind of level in the same way. So as you kind of get lower, if you're lower level, you get more bonus CP and stuff quickly. You need less XP to get to the next level, but the higher you are, the more XP you need. The thing with this, you might go, well, if I'm 3,600 CP and he's 1,000, surely there's an imbalance. But because there's a blanket of what you can have from the passives and then only so many slottable ones, he can only put on 9 slottable things. I think it's 12 slottable things. And you can only put on 12 as well. So as long as you have your 12 and he has his 12, your power level's similar. He just has more choice as to what those 12 are. So it's a really good way to kind of balance the difference between a high CP player and a low CP player. They've also changed how the CP stats work. So if you didn't know, you used to get bonus stats up to 300 CP, so health, magic, and stamina. That's now just in the base. So when you get to, obviously, your character levels up, you get up to a bonus of 16,000 health. That used to be 8,000, so that's quite a big boost. You also get an extra about 4,000 or 5,000 magic and stamina. So you kind of, when you went into sort of CP, you had a big boost in your stats. That's just on all characters now, CP or no CP, which is great. So that's a really useful thing that makes it much easier for people to play between BGs and Cyrodiil. So you CP, no CP. They also, as well, to acknowledge the lack of mitigation, have increased just the flat damage reduction. So all players take 15% reduced damage at all times. So that's just really important to note. And the last thing they've done is they've also changed weapon and spell damage. So as you level up, you gain 20 weapon and spell damage per level. And when you get to level 50, you got 1,000. So you always have a base weapon and spell damage now, which, 1,000 drop to, it's free damage. You're not going to moan about that. So that's quite a nice change. As with kind of the armor stuff, this is really, it's very kind of role-playing-esque, in all honesty. The idea is that if you're in light armor, you're wearing cloth, you're wearing robes, you should move quickly, you should be able to, roll and bash and break free. that kind of stuff much easier. The issue is that you're on robes, so of course you're going to take more damage from swords and stuff. Your block's also going to be quite bad because you've got no armour to just take the impact, and you're also probably going to notice that your bashing isn't going to be great because there's no force behind it. So the idea is that you get some like flavour bonuses, and then you get some sort of penalties to offset it. The one thing that's quite cool is if you're in light armour, you obviously are attuned to the arcane, so magic. So as such, if you're kind of used to working with magic, you should probably be able to defend against it better. So you get damage reduction from magic attacks. The trade-off is you take more damage from swords and stuff. Now you probably go, well, that's really awful because I don't want to take more damage. If we go down to heavy armour, we'll get to medium in a second. Heavy armour is just the opposite. The idea is that you take less damage from swords and axes and physical damage, basically. You can also block more damage, which is great for tanks. You can also do more damage with bashes. You can also take less damage when you're immune to CC. So when you get stunned and stuff, you take less damage once you're on the floor, which is awesome. The issue is you take more damage from magic characters. You also get sort of snared slightly. Your roll dodge is really expensive, and you can't really sneak. Like, you can sneak somewhat, but it's not as easy as it would be in, say, medium armor. So the idea is that heavy and light are the polar opposites. Light armor is magic, movement, that kind of playstyle. Heavy armor is, blocking, taking damage, absorbing it, staying alive. Medium armor is in the middle. This is all about movement. So this reduces your sprint, reduces your sneak, reduces your block. It also reduces your damage from AoEs. So you're kind of like a slippery rogue that you're trying to get in and out. And if someone sort of catches you, you'll manage to kind of just dodge part of it. So you don't take as much AoE damage. It's that kind of idea. There's no penalties with medium armor, which is really interesting. I do wonder if they will change it though. I would maybe put in a penalty like you take more dot damage. So although you don't get hit by AoEs because you kind of avoid them, if you're burning, you're going to take... I might just add a few just penalties to kind of offset them, so there's a bit of choice. And what's really cool is that you can mix and match them. So they've changed the passives in the armour, which is a bit further down, so that you don't need 5 pieces of light armour to get the penetration. Every piece increases penetration a little bit. And that means that you can basically put on 3 light armour, 3 heavy armour, and now you've got literally the best of both worlds. That this obviously you get more damage done because of the penalty from physical attacks, but because you have obviously the heavy armor bonuses, they offset it, so they just neutralize each other. So it's a really cool idea, and I think actually this could work quite well. There's lots of information down here which you don't need to worry about. As with the light armor passives, they've changed this. So this is how it works now. Concentration, which is the spell penetration passive, it now gives 939 per piece of light armor. So that's obviously a really, really good change. It's basically the same amount of penetration, just divided by 5. So you get the same amount of penetration as you did before, which is great. But what happens is that you don't need to have all 5 pieces of light armor on. They've also changed the crit as well, and this is something they didn't really speak much about, but they mentioned last time. And they're trying to lower the crit chance to basically make it so that all of your damage in PvE isn't just critical damage, where you just stack high crit chance like Mother Sorrow and go to town. What they've done to kind of help it is they've reduced the crit bonus to 1% per piece rather than 5 and 10%. So anybody who's the astute of you, the keen eye, will go 7 light armor 7%, but I had 10%. So yes, there is a 3% nerf here, which is subtle, and it will play a part in PvE and in PvP. They've also changed the spell warden, so that now gives you more armor per piece, so that makes sense. As with medium armor, they've changed how this now works, so this passive now gives you 2% per piece of medium armor. So anybody who's astute will go 7 pieces, 7 times 2 is 14. Okay, that's a 1% nerf to damage. So it's not a big nerf, but what this does open up is that if you're in heavy armor, you could start some medium to get some bonus damage, so that's quite a cool thing. And dexterity, they've changed the crit thing to be similar to light armor. As with heavy armor, they've changed how the healing thing works, so the rapid mending. Basically, you get 1% for every 2.5 pieces of heavy armor worn, rather than 4 and then 8%, so for wearing 5 pieces. So it's a little bit complicated, but every 2 out of 1 piece of heavy armor worn, you get some healing. So it's alright. It's a slight nerf, as with a lot of the things, but it's not massive. They've changed resolve as well, so now it's basically slightly less, but there isn't really much. It was 363, it's 343, so it's a tiny nerf. And Revitalize, which is the one about heavy attacks and that kind of stuff. This passive now increases the resources restored from your fully charged heavy attacks by 2.4% per piece, rather than a flat 25%. So again, 4 times 7, you're getting very similar return, but you have to have full 7 to kind of match it, whereas before it was just 5. So slight nerf, but ever so slight. Big thing for console players, guys. So if you are a PS4 player or Xbox player, then you can rejoice that you can now see all of the stats. The penetration, all the healing passives, and all that kind of stuff. So it's just much easier. And don't worry, it's a button, it's a toggle. So you just turn it on to go click on advanced stats, view them, bish bash bosh, you're all sorted. You don't need to worry about having your character sheet overloaded if you don't want to. They've done some stuff to faster travel with homes and houses and stuff, and some new furniture. So, feel free to check all that stuff out. There is a new antiquity. The antiquity, though, isn't really a game-changing one. It's more of just an achievement, so you don't need to worry too much about this. It's just a map. They got some new Battlegrounds collectibles. So these are remotes, and they're quite cool. They were shown on Twitch, so go and check them out there if you're not sure. They have also changed how the system mail works. So the system mail was really laggy. You'd buy something and you wouldn't receive it for like 10 minutes, or you'd have to change zones. It was really annoying. So they have changed this somewhat. The system mail includes things like NPCs, so hirelings, rewards you get from collector's packs, things you get from like PvP, things you get from random dungeons, so like undaunted exploration supplies, that stuff, things you get from guild traders, so things you bought, or mails that bounce back. Okay, so what currently happens is all sort of mails that you have in your inbox will be given a timer of 30 days. When that timer gets close to 0, the mail will be highlighted with red text, so you can really see it, and it gets deleted. That's literally it. So there's nothing too massive. It's just to make sure that people can't have infinite storage, which I know some people do. They send mail back and forward and just infinitely store loads of items. There's a prologue quest, so that's it. If you play on the PTS, then obviously this is how you get the template. Just check that out. And then I'm going to go through the skills and stuff now. So yeah, let's see what you think of this. Champion point system. Tooltips in the champion point system are still under adjustments, so what you might see may change, so don't panic. Some champion things aren't quite correct, some things are missing a few things, so they're just basically saying there's some things missing. There's a few things like the champion point star, shield master, is not properly applying to crystallized slab or sun shield because of their morphs, so I think it's something to do with like health stuff. So if it's kind of a morph that has the scaling on health, it's not working as well as it should do because it's the way in which it works. So yeah, but just note that it doesn't really affect things like leap and stuff, so it's not a big deal, and it will be fixed most likely before live server, so don't panic. Trial stuff's all the same, all sort of same. Antiquities, they fixed a few things here, but nothing massive in all honesty, so nothing to worry about for that. Dungeons wise are the sort of bug fixes generally, bug fixes, and bug fixes, you get the idea. Still more bug fixes and just tweaks to improve balance. And this is the big one, game melee and combat. So let's find out what this is. General, gaining resistances for a particular damage type no longer grants immunities to its respective status effect, and adjusted racial passives that once grant immunities to make up for this loss. This is a big change. If you were a dark elf, you had burning immunity, and Dragonites could get magicka back if they applied the burning status effect to you. If you're immune to burning, it's harder for them to apply it, so they couldn't then get the resources back. So it made some really odd situations. Like Wood Health had the same thing with the poison reduction. So they've just kind of said, look, you just take less damage from this, but you're not immune to getting the status effect. So I think that's a good change. It just makes it all races more balanced. And they have adjusted the percentages to make it more fair. Monsters also have no longer have a random chance to apply those effects to you, so that's quite cool. They fixed some issues with just how status effects proc, because they didn't really proc as well as they should have done, so just lots of bugs there. They've also fixed a few bugs here. So they've added in a few new things. They added a few new things, which are there are 3 new status effects for the following damage types: bleed, physical, magic damage. Bleed damage has a chance of applying hemorrhage, and it's obviously hemorrhaging. It deals slightly weaker damage than burning over 4 seconds and applies minor mangle to the target while affected. Now, minor mangle reduces your damage done, so it means you do less damage to other. Minor mangle reduces your max health. So if you're bleeding with this, you get minor mangle, which I think is 5% less health. The max health is at 10%, but you get less max health as a result. Physical damage has a chance to apply sundered. It deals minor damage and applies minor breach. So you get basically your penetration, about 3k penetration for free with physical damage. This is a big deal. Like, I don't know if people will talk about this, but this is a really big deal for PvP. If you're 2H and you're spamming Dizzying Swing, Execution, their physical damage, you're going to apply this an awful lot. And having charged, if you can proc minor breach on cooldown, you have a pretty good time of keeping this up then, which means that might be better than sharpened. So charged could become better than sharpened. You can also run poisons, which will then proc the poison status effect more, so you get loads of synergy, which means charge should be quite a good trait for PvP to consider if you use physical damage. I will need to test that though, but that's just my initial thoughts on it. And if you do magic damage, it applies overcharge, which basically applies minor magicka still, which allows you to restore very little magicka. It's 161, I think it is, per second. So it's not a lot of magicka regen, but it's still free sustain, so that's not a bad thing for magicka classes. They've also fixed some issues where some of the status wouldn't apply, and this is all the changes to some of the skills. They're not huge, they're more fixes. Dragon Knight, they adjusted Ardent Flame, and they've gone the Lava Whip, and went, look, they fixed an issue where it didn't really appear on the character sheet properly. Now it does. As with Dark Talons, this ability and Choking Talons now deal flame damage rather than magic. That makes much more sense with the DK, so, you know, I could just see that making more sense. Is also as well to make sure that it kind of works with this change up here. So the idea is that you can't then get the minor magicka still for free, so they're trying to make some compromises. So this works good for like sets like Sun, for example. So the Sun set increases your damage with flame abilities. This now gets buffed by it. And with Petrify, this morph now heals you when the sun ends on the enemy rather than when they hit you. This is a huge change. Like, using Petrify was good for duels if they hit you back, but a good player would obviously not hit you for 2 or 3 seconds, and then you wouldn't get the heal. What they've done now though is they've now made it so that if you use it, you get the heal when they CC break. So this is a really cool way to get just free healing. So you could use this, for example, with Flame Lash, and you got like your stun will heal you and your whip will heal you when it procs. So you've got some really good synergy there. As with Frozen Colossus, this is the ultimate. They basically made sure that its damage is just better. It could return some of the damage back, which it wasn't meant to, so it works properly. Assassination, so mark target. They fixed how this works. So it would apply Major Breach, and obviously if you would purge it would kind of get rid of it. Now this effect will now be considered 2 negative effects instead of 1. One for Major Breach and another for the mark that the caster sees. So before you could like hit 1 purge and you'll get rid of the breach and also the like reveal. Now you won't see it. So you'd have to cast it twice if you use like a Betty, for example, to get Betty to get rid of both things, rather than 1 Betty to get rid of all of it at once. So this is kind of a good sort of just extra stuff to cleanse, but that's about it. They've changed Hidden Refresh, so it now heals every second, and they've adjusted the heal though to be the same amount, so nothing massive. And the synergy is the same, so still a terrible ultimate in all honesty. They've changed Surprise Attack. This now applies the standard effect on hit rather than reducing the target's damage by 5% if you successfully flank. So Sunder, if you remember, up above, Sunder basically makes sure they have minor breach, which is 3,000 penetration nearly. This is obviously 3,000 penetration, which is 5% roughly. So the damage is actually going to be very similar. You can't stack them, that's kind of what they've done. They've also changed Cripple. This morph now applies the overcharge status effect, so minor magicka still for its duration. And they've also fixed magic still to be removed from this ability if you cast it early. So you kind of get the overcharge status effect, but you can't really have like magic skill with magicka still because it's the same thing now. So yeah. As with Dark Magic, they've nerfed Sorcerer a tiny bit, so they've just basically made sure Sorcerer does slightly less damage, 2% roughly, and it's also kind of, the range kind of works properly. So if you're in melee range, it kind of casts really quick with the Crystal Frag proc, so just a bit more sort of consistent. They fixed some issues with the mines, which they weren't working properly. They've also fixed some issues with the curses, and they fixed some issues with overload where that didn't really work properly. So, yeah, great. As with Templar Atrix Spear, this passive now has a 3-second window between each tick rather than 1.1. This is a great change. Like, this needed it. So if you're playing a Templar, it was really hard to proc Burning Light, but you had quite a big cooldown. It would proc, then it'd be down, proc, down. Whereas now you can like skill, and kind of weave a skill to get this up much higher if you're weaving properly. So this is a good change. They've then changed Solar Flare. And Solar Flare, they've reduced the cast time, so not a big thing, but they've reduced the damage heavily. That's a big damage drop. They have reduced the cost a little bit, and the developers, which I think this is a great thing, like developers, if you see this, like this is one of the things that really helps players understand what you're doing. So they've said that similar cast time abilities had a similar approach for quick cast time to make this easier to weave in the 1-second cooldown. This should also help reduce burst, potentially combined with other hard-hitting skills for PvP. So you could like cast this and then javelin somebody and then do another skill and it all land at once. It'll be a bit harder to do that now. Lightweaver, that's just something that nobody uses, so it's passive, but don't worry. As with the Warden, they fixed an issue with the Frozen Gate, it's just damage. And they changed a few things with bows, so they changed Snipe quite heavily actually. So heavy attacking with bows has a completely new reload animation that is faster and smoother than before, with 100% less jitters. The power of Sober Mind does wonders on the battlefield. Now, if you use heavy attacks, I've got a PvP build coming out called Light Attack Larry that uses just light attacks, and it does also heavy attacks now and again. And when I went into their bow heavy attack, you do really see the stutter, so this is a good change. They've changed the accuracy passive, so this passive now grants critical chance rather than weapon crit, which makes sense. So, and it gives you 6% critical chance. So they're trying to homogenize, or how do you say it, the two sort of crit things together. They're trying to work towards that, it seems. And then for Snipe, which people absolutely love, they've reduced the cast time, which this is a good thing because it means it's less bursty. Because the longer that it takes to cast, you can kind of end up getting more sort of damage in at further range because you kind of glitch it somewhat. So this kind of will help avoid that in all honesty. They're much faster to weave, smoother animations. They've reduced the damage by 21%, which is a huge damage drop by Solar Flare. They have reduced the cost though. They've increased the travel speed as well. So it helps reduce the ability to fire multiple projectiles before they originally landed. So when you get hit with a desync, that's what caused it. You got hit with an arrow, but the first one hit you when the second one and the third one kind of landed. So you didn't, it was really awkward. They have changed focus aim. This morph now reduces in cost reduction rather than damage, so that's not really a great one in all honesty. But the big thing is to make it similar to crystal shards, so that you can't put these in with loads of burst combos. Like you could cast a snipe and crystal shards and land them at the same time in Stab Sulk. So that's quite a good change, and I think this will. I don't think it will kill snipers, and I will test on the PTS. So if you like my bow gank and the shadow and that stuff, I will go and test all that and see can I get it working still. But I do think this will reduce its effectiveness quite drastically. So we will watch this over the next couple of weeks. So yeah, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss those videos. As with Dual Wield, they've changed Deadly Cloak, so they've just reduced the visual and audio effects. That's about it. The damage is kind of the same. They changed Rend, so this morph hits box now more accurately, matches its visual effects. It's a significant area of effect increase. Nobody uses it, so yeah. Twin Blade and Blunt, they reworked this passive, so it applies these bonuses. Axes now increase your critical damage and healing by 2 to 4% per axe, rather than having the chance to apply a bleed. That's a really cool thing, because you can apply bleeds with axes anyway, so you get the bleed anyway, but you just now get this, because bleed damage will proc the hemorrhaging passive, the status effect, so you kind of would have access to it most likely. Daggers now also give you crit chance per dagger, so rather than being 5%, it's 3.4 per dagger, so that's a buff. Maces also give you a flat penetration amount, which is a really big change, and that is a really, really good change. So now you don't have to worry about, am I going to overpen them or not? For 30k, do I get 6k back? 6k penetration, what do I get? So this is a really good change. And swords now give a flat weapon damage per sword rather than increasing the damage done. This sword change is a nerf to magical builds, because magical builds would use dual just for the damage done, which work with proc sets. So if you do use dual wield on magical classes, it's nowhere near as good as it was now. As for 2H, they've done exactly the same thing, but they've done it for 2H, so they've just doubled it all. Maces are 3,300 penetration, which in all honesty is a nerf. You know, if most people had 30,000 armor, for example, 10% is 3,300, 20% is 6,000 armor. So most people were getting 4 to 7k armor pen with the mace last patch. Now it's down to 3,000, so that's a damage drop of, you know, that's about a 3 to 4% damage drop. Swords and stuff, same as up there. They've changed soul magic and just fixed an issue with soul strike. It's still a terrible ultimate, so yep. They've fixed some issues with misform, so it now works apparently. Yes, we'll see how that is. And they've also changed Hircing's Bounty, which is the heal and the werewolf. So Hircing's Fortitude, which is the morph, they've reduced the health and stamina recovery cap of this morph down to 333. So when you'd cast it, you get some extra regen. You don't get as much regen, which will help with the werewolf. They've also changed Brutal Pounce. So this is the one where you gap close. They increased the kind of bug with the dot wasn't really working, that's working properly. And they've basically increased the bleed, so you now get a 3.3% damage boost, which is great. So if you use Brutal Pounce for the dot, you get another damage boost, so that's really good in PvP, and also in PvE mainly. They've also changed Savage Strength. This is a really good change. This applies now Major Resolve on both ranks, rather than increasing your armor. So this means you are no longer forced to have to run things like Mighty Tudor. It also solves the issue with where werewolves were ridiculously tanky if they had Mighty Tudor and they had this. But they would used to have like 10,000 there and like 6,000 armor from Tudor, plus the one piece. So they would have like 17, 18k armor with just being in werewolf and having this, with no other armor included. So this will give them a nerf of about 4,000 resistance. So that's quite a big nerf for them, in all honesty. And they've also changed the pack leave the morph, which is the wolves that summon. From this ultimate no longer taunt enemies, and they cause them to behave erratically. So this is a PvE change. So before the werewolves would attack mobs and stuff, the mobs would go crazy. Do I hit the werewolf? Do I not? Is it mortal? Is it not? It's all like weird. They've also changed the Banish the Wicked passive from the Fighters Guild. So this now grants you 1, 2, or 3 ultimate whenever you kill somebody, rather than whenever you kill somebody and you have a Fighters Guild ability slotted. This is a really good change for lots of stamina classes. It's really bad for Magicka. So if you're a stamina class, you slot Camo Hunter quite easily or Dawnbreaker, you get 3 ult when you kill people. So great. You know, whether they're werewolf or not, you get ultimate back now on every kill. Like brilliant. If you're a Magicka build, you don't really use Fighter Guild's abilities. So yeah. They've also fixed an issue of entropy. It can be a bit glitchy, so it shouldn't be bad now. And they've fixed some issues with spell symmetry. Alliance War, they've changed this a little bit. So this passive now grants Major Gallop when purchased at rank 1 or 2. So that's continuous attack. Major Gallop is your the movement speed on the horse. So that's quite nice. And Rapid Maneuvers has been changed. It no longer grants Major Gallop on cast since it's no longer necessary. They reduced the cost of this ability heavily. 400. I love it. But they reduced the cost by 400. So what happens is when you get continuous attack, when you get level 1 or level 2, your horse always has Major Gallop now, which is a really nice thing. You always have a movement speed boost. So go in PvP and get continuous ASAP. Like I'd recommend doing that. Moving on to racials, they've changed some of the passives to just be in line with the CP changes and the changes above. So Argonian, this doesn't apply you to seize immunity anymore, so you can get hit with fire from the seizes and stuff. And it does apply an equal amount of potion resistance. So this means it means that it's kind of more lore friendly, which is a good idea. The resourceful passive now grants 1,000 stamina. So that, and the resources you get from potions is down to 3,100, which is 900 nerf per resource, which is quite a big nerf. If you're a Breton, your magic recovery has gone up by 30. That's a big one. If you're a Dark Elf, your max magic and stamina has gone up by 15, 20 roughly. It's not a big increase, but you can be hit by the burning status effect. But your flame resistance has gone up, so although you can be hit with burn and you just take less damage from fire sources, so like DKs would be suffering more so against a Dark Elf. If you're a high elf, this passive now also grants weapon damage and spell damage, so it means you can actually get high elf Templars that will be stamina or magicka, and that would work quite well with how the Templar plays. The spell recharge has gone down a tiny bit, and this works with any ability rather than class abilities. So this, and obviously this one here, the element of talent and the spell recharge now kind of allow you to play it as a high elf stamina build, because when you do damage you get resources back, which is great, and you get weapon damage anyway. So it's very similar to a dark elf. Dark elf gives you the resistances for fire, high elf gives you the damage for both, and some sustain. So high elf I could see being a really good DPS class for PvE or PvP. As with Imperial, this is obviously the one you have to buy. You don't get health or stuff when you do damage. They've just increased the cost reduction instead. So rather than getting resources back when you do damage, you just get more cost reduction, up to 6% per, which is everything. So that's ultimates, that's heals, magicka, stamina, whatever. So being an Imperial was a really good way to kind of sustain and have cheap ultimates. If you're a Khajiit, they have changed this passive to give you more crit damage. So the Feline Ambush does 2% more crit damage now. And Lunar Blessing now gives you a little bit more resource, 915, so a little bit more. If you are Nord, they have basically changed it so it's not as OP, in all honesty, for PvP. You can get hit with shield, but you've got more shield resistance. And they've reduced the armour down by sort of 1300, which is about 2% damage reduction, damage taken, you have now. So it is obviously a slight nerf to a Nord, but they were very, very strong. And then as an Orc, they've reduced the max stamina granted down to 1000, so it's a big stamina drop. The Swift Warrior passive now grants weapon and spell damage rather than weapon damage, so you can use this as a mage if you want. And an Unflinch Rage, this passive now heals you for 2100 health when you deal damage once every 4 seconds, rather than 600 per second. This is quite a lot of free healing actually, so I can see Orcs being really, really, really strong. So I would need to test that for PvP, but this could be quite a good class for Templars as well, because you can just get free healing with jabs, whether you're magical or stamina. If you're a Red Guard, they've increased the stamina restored from the passive by a tiny bit, and this can apply on any damage rather than direct damage. And if you're a Wood Elf, the movement speed and armour penetration granted from this passive no longer require you to roll dodge, so this is a permanent armour penetration, which means being a Wood Elf might be really good for sniping, but I will need to test that. They have also reduced the movement speed though, so you only get 5% now at all times, and they've reduced the penetration by about 600. They've also changed it so that you don't get the poison status effect anymore, and it just gives you some disease and poison resistance. Now we're getting to item sets, and this is really interesting. I've heard people talk about this. I haven't read it massively, but we'll see what they say. So, reduce the amount of critical chance rating granted per set bonus to 657 or 3%, down from 8.33, so 3.8%. This means all sets and passives that granted critical rating have now been adjusted to meet this new standard. In short, it makes a lot of sense. If you put on a piece that has crit rating, it's a 3% increase. I think they should just change it to increase your crit by 3%, but it's a 3% crit increase on any piece of item, which makes so much more sense. This is a new standard, so all sets have been adjusted for this on the whole. Obviously, they might change a few things, but take it with a pinch of salt. Reduce the single stat line of critical chance down to that, as we said, so 3%. So you will get a slight crit damage nerf if you had a high crit set like Mother Sorrow, but you'd only lose at 1 or 2%. They've also reduced the perfected ability sets down to 526, down from 666. So I guess that's like 2.5% roughly. A Berserker Warrior, that reduced the weapon critical down a bit. So this is all like crit stuff. Obviously feel free to read all of that, but that's mainly crit stuff. They've also done some stuff to kind of stop people from pre-buffing up. So in efforts to combat against the effectiveness of pre-buff sets, or sets that retain their effect after activating and unequipping them, we've made the following adjustments. These sets now require you to be in combat for the 5 piece to activate. All Halls of Fabrication unique sets, Armour Master, Mysterious Service, Moondancer, Lich, Spectre's Eye, Lucestes, and Undaunted Unweevil Infiltrator. This is a big one here. I don't want to say I've taken credit for this, but I've made a few heavy attack builds using these sets, and because you could pre-buff up before the fight, they're all so OP. So I think this will make this playstyle not as good anymore. And they've also changed some of the buffs as well. So these buffs are no longer required if you unequip a piece. So Battle Stygian, so if you get it, you can take it off and stuff. And Adept Rider, they've changed this now. This provides Major Gallop and Expedition when worn, rather than granting Evasion when mounted. So that makes more sense because you're a rider. Yes, it seems to make more sense. They've changed this set. Trazaka's Claws, I think it's pronounced. This set now grants up to 129 weapon damage on its 5-piece. They have decreased the damage a little bit though. Flame Blossom. The issue with the set is it did not properly scale with damage over time modifiers. This is really interesting. So this might get a damage boost with CP, but we'll need to see the CP video. So do subscribe and stuff if you're not already. Iron Blood, they've just fixed that. Automation now works with bleed damage as well, so that's a good idea. Alkosh, they have changed this a little bit. The armour reduction portion of the set now scales off 100% of the weapon damage up to 3000, rather than being a flat based. So this means you actually do need to you can't just have this flat bonus. You now actually have to spec a little bit into weapon damage, so that makes somewhat of sense. Okay, and previous adjustments of how to make the set shine more and utilise on stamina damage dealers missed the mark, so we're converting it to something with far less variance in total power. Note that the value is still relatively achievable on tank builds who wish to run it instead, but they may need to run some extra weapon damage where they normally might not reach it. So it just means that you have to put a little bit in order to fix it. Alessian Bulwark, this is a really good change. So Alessian's a health recovery set in PvP, and it's really OP currently. So currently there's no cap on it. So if you are having 30-40k armour, you could get 2k health regen from this quite easily. So now it's put to 1320, so this is quite a big nerf. They've also fixed Ravager where this could proc when it wasn't meant to. So this would proc on Hurricane, for example. No, it won't. So it was a really good, the bug was quite cool because it actually made Ravager useful for Stamzulk, but now it's going to be terrible once more. Selene has changed. This set no longer has a proc chance, but it's now guaranteed on any non-melee damage. The cooldown is a bit higher, and the damage is slightly less. And then Tremor Scale, they fixed an issue with the physical reduction because it was kind of snaring when it wasn't meant to. And then this is just general sort of stuff to dungeons, UIs, housing, you get the idea. But yeah, that is the change. So it's really interesting actually. Really, really interesting. I think there's a few real key takeaways. So if you have stuck around for this long, big thank you. I do appreciate that. It really, really helps the channel. Do consider liking and commenting as well. That does help. But what to take away from this? Well, first and foremost, the CP rework sounds amazing. Being able to slot, stars, so you don't always have just crazy OP all the time. So you actually have a bit more choice, a bit more character customization. Do you specialize in X or Y, whilst you still have that broad base level of power that you get from CP as well. So it means you can really pick and match your CP for what you're wanting to do, which is a really good change. I also think the new advanced stats UI is that should have been in the game many, many years ago. So now that they've added it is a really promising sign. I think the changes to some of the sets make a lot of sense, and the changes to actually some of the skills make sense as well. But I think all in all, balance will be very similar to what we see currently in Markov. I think when we move into, obviously, the Flames of Ambition, I do think that things like Crimson will still be OP, things like Sapphire Scales will still be OP, things like Malakath still OP, so I see proc sets being really, really strong still. But that does kind of lead me into kind of what's coming up for the channel and just ESO generally. In the Twitch stream, they did say they're going to do some serial testing where they will look at proc sets and will procs actually be causing lag. So they're going to test it, disable all the procs in Cyrodiil and find the answer. This is a really interesting idea because if it does, it shows procs that are the issue with lag in the game. And then they need to optimize how they work or just remove them. So that'd be a really interesting thing to see, and particularly how people adapt in PvP. Last time they did tests, people didn't play. Will they play again? I don't know, but that's happening in February on PC. So it's, I think, week 2 of February, so about a week or so from now. And it's on PC EU and PC NA. Obviously, I play on PC EU. I do stream on Twitch, so you can see what it looks like there. I will be obviously trying that quite heavily. But all in all, you know, it's just quite an exciting patch. I'm going to wrap this video up in a moment, but I just want to say a massive thank you to those Patreons. Like, their continued support allows me to make videos, so a huge thank you. And if you like what we do and you want to support myself and the channel, there's a link in the description, but you don't have to. And as always, take care guys, thanks for watching, and bye!